Before we begin our journey tonight, I would love it if you could please subscribe and like this video if you are enjoying it. It truly helps me create more content like this for you. And please leave a comment telling me where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. I love connecting with our community from all around the world and seeing how we are all finding peaceful moments together, no matter where we are or what time zone we call home. Now, let us begin. Close your eyes gently and allow yourself to sink deeper into your bed, your pillow cradling your head like a soft cloud. Feel the weight of your body melting into the mattress beneath you, as if you are floating on a gentle river of tranquility. Take a slow, deep breath in through your nose, and as you exhale, let go of all the tension from your day. Imagine a warm, golden light surrounding you, protecting you, as the soft whisper of an evening breeze carries away all your worries and stress. You are safe, you are comfortable, and you are exactly where you need to be. Our story tonight begins in the year 150 CE, in the heart of the mighty Roman Empire, where the morning sun rises over the 7 hills of Rome, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets that have witnessed the footsteps of emperors and slaves alike. You find yourself awakening not in your comfortable modern bed, but on a thin straw mattress in a cramped apartment building called an insula, where the walls are so thin you can hear your neighbors arguing about the price of bread, and the smell of cooking oil and unwashed bodies fills the air like a thick, suffocating blanket. The first challenge of your day in ancient Rome is simply getting dressed, as you realize that the simple act of putting on clothing is far more complex than you ever imagined, requiring you to wrap yourself in layers of linen and wool that must be pinned and tied in precise ways, while your fingers fumble with unfamiliar clasps and brooch that seem to have a mind of their own. As you step out into the narrow street, the sensory assault is immediate and overwhelming, with the sound of wooden cartwheels grinding against stone, the shouts of merchants hawking their wares, and the constant din of construction as workers repair the aqueducts that bring life-giving water to the city. The air is thick with smoke from countless cooking fires, mixed with the pungent aroma of olive oil, fermented fish sauce, and the less pleasant odors of human waste and rotting garbage that accumulates in the corners of alleyways. You quickly realize that the romanticized vision of ancient Rome from movies and books is nothing like the harsh reality of daily life, where survival depends on your ability to navigate a complex social hierarchy, avoid disease, and find enough food to sustain yourself through each passing day. Your first stop is the local bakery, where you hope to purchase some bread for your morning meal, but you discover that the line stretches around the block, filled with people who have been waiting since before dawn for their daily ration of subsidized grain. The baker, a gruff man with flour-dusted hands and suspicious eyes, looks at you with the disdain reserved for obvious foreigners, and you realize that your modern accent and unfamiliar mannerisms mark you as an outsider in this ancient world. As you wait in the crushing crowd, pressed against bodies that have not seen a proper bath in weeks, you begin to understand that personal hygiene in ancient Rome is a luxury that few can afford, and that the pleasant-smelling oils and perfumes you have read about were only available to the wealthy elite. The morning grows hotter as the sun climbs higher in the sky, and you feel sweat beginning to bead on your forehead as you realize that there is no air conditioning No electric fans and no ice-cold drinks to provide relief from the oppressive heat. The heavy woolen clothing that seemed appropriate when you first put it on now feels like a suffocating prison, and you watch enviously as some of the more experienced locals have learned to dress in lighter fabrics and seek shelter in the shadows of buildings. When you finally reach the front of the bread line, you discover that the loaf you receive is hard as a rock, filled with grit and sand that crunches between your teeth, and you understand why so many Romans had such terrible dental problems, with missing teeth and painful abscesses that could lead to life-threatening infections. As you wander through the Forum, the great center of Roman political and commercial life, you are struck by the incredible diversity of people from all corners of the empire, speaking dozens of different languages and wearing clothing that reflects their distant homelands. However, you also notice the ever-present threat of violence that simmers just beneath the surface, as groups of young men with scarred faces and calloused hands eye you with predatory interest, sizing you up as a potential victim for robbery or worse. The lack of any organized police force means that justice is often a matter of personal strength or political connections, and you realize that your soft modern hands and lack of combat experience make you an easy target in this dangerous urban environment. The afternoon brings new challenges as you attempt to find work to earn enough money for food and shelter. But you discover that most occupations require specialized skills that take years to master, and that the guild system prevents outsiders from entering established trades. Your modern education, so valuable in contemporary society, means nothing in a world where literacy is rare, and most knowledge is passed down through oral tradition and hands-on apprenticeship. The jobs available to unskilled laborers are backbreaking and dangerous, involving the hauling of heavy stones for construction projects, the cleaning of sewers and public latrines, or the brutal work in the mines and quarries that supplied the empire with its raw materials. As evening approaches, you face the terrifying reality of finding a place to sleep in a city where homelessness is common and where the insulae, or apartment buildings, are overcrowded fire traps that regularly collapse or burn down, killing dozens of residents in the process. The wealthy Romans live in spacious villas with private gardens and running water, but these are as inaccessible to you as palaces, protected by armed guards and high walls that keep out the unwanted masses. The public baths, which you had hoped might provide some relief and cleanliness, turn out to be breeding grounds for disease, where skin infections and parasites spread rapidly among the crowded bathers, and where the water is changed so infrequently that it becomes a murky soup of human filth and contamination. The streets of Rome after dark are a maze of dangers, where muggers and cutthroats lurk in the shadows of unlit alleyways, and where the absence of street lighting makes navigation treacherous and potentially fatal. You stumble over broken stones and open sewers, your modern shoes providing little protection against the sharp edges and slippery surfaces that can cause serious injury. The sounds of the night are filled with the cries of the injured and dying, the barking of wild dogs that roam the streets in packs, and the distant sound of revelry from the taverns where those fortunate enough to have money drink themselves into oblivion to forget their daily struggles. Your hunger becomes a constant companion as you realize that food in ancient Rome is not only scarce but also dangerous, with no refrigeration to prevent spoilage and no understanding of food safety that leads to frequent outbreaks of food poisoning and dysentery. The water supply, despite the impressive engineering of the aqueducts, is often contaminated with lead from the pipes, causing slow poisoning that leads to madness and death. The wine, which is the primary beverage for most Romans, is often adulterated with dangerous substances to increase its potency or mask its poor quality, leading to blindness and organ failure among regular drinkers. As you seek shelter for the night, you encounter the harsh realities of Roman social stratification, where your lack of proper documentation and social connections marks you as a non-person in the eyes of the law. Slavery is not just a historical footnote, but a present reality that could easily become your fate if you are caught without proper papers, or if you fall into debt. The slave markets that operate openly in the city are filled with human beings who are bought and sold like livestock, their lives and deaths determined by the whims of their masters and the demands of the imperial economy. The night brings little rest as you huddle in whatever shelter you can find, perhaps a doorway or an abandoned building, surrounded by the sounds of suffering and desperation that echo through the urban landscape. The cold stone beneath your body draws the heat from your bones, and you realize that hypothermia is a real threat even in the Mediterranean climate, especially for those without proper clothing or shelter. The rats that scurry around your feet are not just nuisances but potential carriers of plague and other diseases that regularly sweep through the crowded urban population, killing thousands in a matter of weeks. Your second day in ancient Rome begins with the crushing realization that yesterday's struggles were not an aberration, but rather the normal state of existence for the vast majority of the population. The morning brings no relief from hunger, thirst, or exhaustion, but rather the prospect of another day of desperate survival in a world that has no safety net for those who fall through the cracks of society. The beautiful marble monuments and impressive architecture that define our modern image of Rome are built on the backs of countless individuals who live and die in grinding poverty, their lives considered expendable in the grand scheme of imperial ambition. As you continue to navigate this ancient world, you begin to understand the true meaning of civilization and progress, realizing that the modern conveniences you have always taken for granted represent centuries of human advancement and social development. The simple act of turning on a light switch, drinking clean water from a tap, or purchasing food from a grocery store represents a level of technological and social sophistication that would seem like magic to the ancient Romans. Your experience in this harsh environment gives you a new appreciation for the long struggle of humanity to create a world where basic human needs can be met with dignity and security. The diseases that stalk the streets of ancient Rome are not just inconveniences but death sentences, with no antibiotics to treat infections, no vaccines to prevent epidemics, and no modern medical knowledge to diagnose and treat conditions that are easily curable in the contemporary world. A simple cut that becomes infected can lead to gangrene and death, while childhood diseases that we consider minor can wipe out entire families in a matter of days. The average life expectancy in ancient Rome is less than half of what we enjoy today, and the infant mortality rate is so high that parents often do not even name their children until they are certain they will survive their first year. As you drift deeper into sleep, imagine that you are slowly leaving this harsh ancient world behind, carried away on a gentle current of time that flows like a peaceful river through the centuries. Feel yourself floating upward, away from the stone streets and crowded insulae, rising above the 7 hills of Rome as they fade into the mist of history. The sounds of the ancient city grow fainter and fainter, replaced by the gentle whisper of wind through leaves and the soft murmur of distant water flowing over smooth stones. You are safe now, protected by the passage of time and the progress of human civilization, wrapped in the comfort of modern life like a warm blanket on a cold night. Let your breathing slow and deepen as you feel yourself settling into the soft sanctuary of your own bed, in your own time, where clean water flows at the touch of a button, where food is abundant and safe, and where the rule of law protects you from the violence and chaos that once ruled the ancient world. Feel gratitude flowing through your body like warm honey, appreciation for the countless generations who struggled and sacrificed to build the world you now inhabit. Close your eyes and let sleep carry you away to peaceful dreams, knowing that you are exactly where you belong, in this moment, in this place, safe and secure in the modern world that humanity has built through centuries of progress and hope. The third dawn in ancient Rome brings with it a deeper understanding of just how precarious life truly is in this magnificent yet merciless empire, where the marble facades of grand temples and government buildings mask the brutal realities of daily existence for the common people. You wake to find that your body has already begun to show the signs of malnutrition, with your clothes hanging looser on your frame and your energy levels depleted from the constant struggle to find adequate food and clean water. The morning air carries the acrid smell of smoke from countless cooking fires, mixed with the sour odor of fermented wine and the ever-present stench of human waste that flows through the crude sewage systems beneath the city streets. As you venture out into the crowded marketplace, you observe the intricate social dance that governs every interaction in Roman society, where a single misstep in protocol or etiquette can result in public humiliation or worse. The rigid class system divides the population into senators, equestrians, citizens, freed slaves, and slaves, with each group having specific rights, obligations, and restrictions that determine their fate in this hierarchical world. Your modern sensibilities about equality and human dignity clash violently with the casual acceptance of slavery and the brutal treatment of those considered inferior, creating a constant sense of moral discomfort that weighs heavily on your conscience. The legal system that governs Roman society is as complex as it is unforgiving, with laws that vary depending on your social status, citizenship, and the particular whims of local magistrates who often interpret justice through the lens of personal gain or political advantage. You discover that the concept of being innocent until proven guilty does not exist in this world, and that accusations of theft, treason, or moral impropriety can result in immediate punishment without the benefit of a fair trial or legal representation. The punishments themselves are designed not just to deter crime, but to provide public entertainment, with crucifixions, gladiatorial combat, and feeding criminals to wild animals serving as popular spectacles that draw cheering crowds. Your attempts to find meaningful work continue to be frustrated by the guild system that protects established craftsmen and merchants from competition, forcing you to accept whatever dangerous or degrading labor might be available to desperate outsiders. The construction sites where you seek employment are death traps where workers regularly fall from scaffolding, are crushed by falling stones, or suffer serious injuries from primitive tools and machinery that lacks even basic safety features. The foremen who oversee these projects treat workers as expendable resources, showing no concern for their welfare or survival, and you quickly learn that a single complaint about working conditions can result in immediate dismissal and blacklisting from future employment. The food situation becomes increasingly dire as you realize that the grain dole that provides free bread to Roman citizens is not available to you as a foreigner, and that the cost of purchasing food on the open market is far beyond your meager earnings. The bread that you can afford is often made from inferior grains mixed with sawdust, chalk, and other adulterants that provide little nutritional value while potentially causing serious digestive problems. The vegetables available in the market are often wilted and spoiled, having been transported long distances without proper preservation, and the meat is frequently contaminated with parasites and bacteria that can cause severe illness or death. As the days pass, you begin to understand the true meaning of the phrase bread and circuses, as you witness how the Roman government uses free food distributions and spectacular entertainment to pacify a population that might otherwise revolt against their oppressive conditions. The gladiatorial games that you had imagined as exciting sporting events reveal themselves to be brutal displays of human suffering, where enslaved fighters are forced to kill each other for the amusement of spectators who cheer loudest when blood is spilled. The chariot races that pack the Circus Maximus are equally violent affairs, with drivers regularly dying in spectacular crashes that are considered part of the entertainment value. The religious practices that permeate Roman society present another layer of complexity and danger as you navigate a world where multiple gods must be appeased through elaborate rituals and sacrifices, and where failure to show proper respect to the imperial cult can be interpreted as treason punishable by death. The temples that dot the cityscape are not just places of worship, but centers of political and economic power, where priests wield significant influence over daily life, and where the wrong religious affiliation can mark you as an enemy of the state. The mystery religions that operate in secret offer alternative spiritual paths, but participation in these cults carries the risk of persecution and execution if discovered by the authorities. The public baths that you had hoped might provide relief from the constant grime and stress of urban life turn out to be microcosms of Roman society, where social hierarchies are maintained even in nakedness, and where the wealthy enjoy private, changing rooms and personal attendance, while the poor are crowded into communal spaces with little privacy or dignity. The water in these baths is rarely changed and becomes a breeding ground for skin diseases, eye infections, and other ailments that spread rapidly among the users. The massage oils and perfumes that are supposed to cleanse and refresh the body are often rancid or contaminated, causing rashes and allergic reactions that can become seriously infected. Your attempts to seek medical attention when you inevitably fall ill reveal the primitive and dangerous state of ancient medicine, where treatments are based on superstition and guesswork rather than scientific understanding. The physicians who practice in Rome are often little more than charlatans who prescribe bloodletting, purging, and the application of toxic substances as cures for ailments that they do not understand. The surgical procedures that are performed without anesthesia or proper sterilization result in agonizing pain and frequent death from infection, making the cure often worse than the disease itself. The housing crisis that plagues ancient Rome affects you directly as you struggle to find safe and affordable shelter in a city where the demand for accommodation far exceeds the supply. The insulae where most people live are poorly constructed multi-story buildings that are prone to collapse, fire, and structural failure, with the upper floors being particularly dangerous due to their distance from emergency exits and their vulnerability to high winds and earthquakes. The rent charged for even the most basic accommodation consumes the majority of your income, leaving little money for food, clothing, or other necessities of life. The transportation system in ancient Rome, while impressive in its engineering, is designed primarily for the movement of military forces and commercial goods rather than for the comfort and convenience of ordinary citizens. The roads that connect the city to the far reaches of the empire are marvels of construction, but traveling on them as a pedestrian or in a simple cart is a bone-jarring experience that can take weeks or months to complete. The absence of any form of public transportation within the city means that you must walk everywhere, often for miles each day, wearing down your feet and legs on the hard stone streets. The entertainment industry that flourishes in Rome is built on the exploitation and suffering of the most vulnerable members of society, with gladiators, actors, and prostitutes being drawn from the ranks of slaves and the desperately poor. The theaters where comedies and tragedies are performed are also venues for political propaganda and social commentary that can be dangerous to certain audience members, depending on their political affiliations and social status. The taverns and brothels that provide escape from the hardships of daily life are often controlled by criminal organizations that prey on their customers through violence, extortion, and the sale of dangerous substances. The military presence that maintains order in the city is a constant reminder of the authoritarian nature of Roman rule, with soldiers patrolling the streets and maintaining checkpoints where citizens can be questioned, searched, or arrested without cause. The Praetorian Guard, which serves as the emperor's personal army, wields enormous power and frequently intervenes in political affairs, sometimes assassinating rulers who displease them and installing new leaders who are more compliant with their wishes. The ordinary citizens live in constant fear of these military forces, knowing that their lives and property are subject to the whims of armed men who answer only to their commanders. Your experience with the Roman legal system becomes painfully direct when you are falsely accused of a minor crime, perhaps the theft of a loaf of bread, or the insulting of a citizen of higher social rank. The trial that follows is a mockery of justice, where your inability to provide character witnesses or pay bribes to court officials virtually guarantees your conviction. The punishment that is imposed is designed to be both painful and humiliating, serving as a warning to others who might consider challenging the established order. The scars, both physical and emotional, that result from this encounter with Roman justice will remain with you for the rest of your abbreviated life. The seasonal changes that affect the city bring new challenges and dangers, as the hot summers create conditions that are ideal for the spread of disease, while the cold winters expose the inadequacies of Roman heating systems and the vulnerability of the poor to hypothermia and frostbite. The autumn rains turn the unpaved streets into rivers of mud mixed with human and animal waste, creating conditions that are both disgusting and dangerous to navigate. The spring floods that regularly affect the lower-lying areas of the city, wash away homes and businesses, leaving thousands of people homeless and destitute. The psychological toll of living in such harsh conditions begins to manifest itself in various ways as you struggle with depression, anxiety, and the constant stress of survival in a hostile environment. The absence of any form of mental health care or social support system means that those who cannot cope with the pressures of Roman life are left to suffer in silence, or to seek solace in dangerous forms of self-medication. The suicide rate among the population is high, particularly among slaves and the desperately poor, who see no hope for improvement in their circumstances. As you continue to navigate this ancient world, you begin to develop a deeper appreciation for the resilience and strength of the human spirit, as you witness countless examples of people who manage to find joy, love, and meaning in the midst of incredible hardship. The families who share their meager resources with neighbors, the craftsmen who take pride in their work despite the difficult conditions, and the teachers who pass on knowledge and wisdom to the next generation, all serve as reminders that humanity can endure and even thrive in the most challenging circumstances. These glimpses of hope and compassion provide brief respites from the overwhelming darkness of daily life in ancient Rome. The cultural richness of the empire becomes apparent as you encounter people from every corner of the known world, each bringing their own traditions, languages, and perspectives to the great melting pot of Roman civilization. The merchants who travel the trade routes that connect Britain to India, the scholars who preserve and transmit the knowledge of Greece and Egypt, and the artists who create beauty in the midst of brutality, all contribute to the complex tapestry of imperial culture. However, this diversity also creates tension and conflict, as different groups compete for resources and recognition while maintaining their distinct identities and loyalties. The weight of weeks in ancient Rome begins to transform your understanding of what it truly means to be human in a world where survival depends entirely on your ability to adapt to circumstances that would be unimaginable to modern sensibilities. Your body has grown thin and wiry from the constant physical demands of daily life. Your hands have developed the calluses and scars that mark a person who works with primitive tools, and your eyes have taken on the wary, calculating look of someone who has learned to assess every situation for potential danger or opportunity. The romantic notions of ancient grandeur that once filled your imagination have been replaced by a grim appreciation for the raw struggle that defines existence in this magnificent yet merciless empire. The changing seasons bring new revelations about the precarious nature of life in Rome, as you witness how quickly prosperity can turn to destitution when the grain ships from Egypt are delayed by storms or pirates, causing bread prices to skyrocket and pushing thousands of families to the brink of starvation. The emperor's popularity rises and falls with the availability of food, and you begin to understand how the complex logistics of feeding 1 million people creates a vulnerability that can be exploited by enemies of the state or disrupted by natural disasters. The public granaries that store the city's food supply are heavily guarded fortresses, and the officials who control their distribution wield power that can mean the difference between life and death for entire neighborhoods. Your attempts to understand the economic system that governs Roman society reveal a world where wealth is concentrated in the hands of a tiny elite, While the vast majority of the population struggles to earn enough to survive from day to day, the concept of social mobility, while not entirely absent, is limited to exceptional individuals who possess rare talents or who are fortunate enough to attract the patronage of powerful benefactors. The patron-client relationships that form the backbone of Roman society create networks of mutual obligation and dependence that can provide security and opportunity for some, but that also trap others in cycles of debt and servitude that are difficult to escape. The religious landscape of Rome presents a bewildering array of competing beliefs and practices, where traditional Roman gods coexist uneasily with exotic deities imported from conquered territories, and where the growing influence of mystery religions challenges the established order in ways that make the authorities increasingly nervous. The imperial cult that deifies the emperor and his family requires public displays of loyalty that can feel hollow and meaningless to those who have witnessed the human frailties and moral failures of their supposedly divine rulers. The priests who serve these various religions often compete for influence and resources, creating a spiritual marketplace where salvation and divine favor are commodities that can be bought and sold. The infrastructure that supports daily life. In Rome, while impressive in its scope and ambition, is also fragile and prone to failure in ways that can have devastating consequences for those who depend on it. The aqueducts that bring fresh water to the city are marvels of engineering, but they are also vulnerable to earthquake damage, enemy sabotage, and the simple wear and tear of time and weather. When these systems fail, even temporarily, the resulting water shortage can trigger riots and social unrest that threaten the stability of the government itself. The roads that connect Rome to its far-flung provinces are similarly impressive, but equally vulnerable to disruption by bandits, rebels, or natural disasters. The cultural life of the empire, while rich and diverse, is also deeply influenced by the political needs of the ruling class, who use art, literature, and entertainment to promote their version of Roman values and to distract the population from their daily struggles. The poets who celebrate the glories of empire often do so while carefully avoiding any criticism of current policies or leaders, knowing that a single misplaced word can result in exile or worse. The historians who record the deeds of emperors and generals must balance their desire for accuracy with their need to survive in a world where truth-telling can be a dangerous profession. Your growing familiarity with Roman law reveals a system that is both sophisticated and arbitrary, where legal principles that seem reasonable in theory are often corrupted by the practical realities of politics and social inequality. The courts that are supposed to provide justice frequently serve instead as venues for settling personal vendettas and advancing political careers, with verdicts that reflect the wealth and connections of the litigants rather than the merits of their cases. The lawyers who practice in these courts are skilled in rhetoric and legal technicalities, but they are also adept at bribery and intimidation, using whatever means necessary to achieve their clients' objectives. The military machine that maintains Roman dominance over the known world is a complex organization that depends on the loyalty and discipline of soldiers who are recruited from every corner of the empire, creating a diverse but potentially unstable force that must be carefully managed to prevent rebellion or civil war. The legions that garrison the frontiers face constant threats from barbarian tribes and rival empires, while the urban cohorts that maintain order in the capital must deal with the more subtle, but equally dangerous challenges of political intrigue and social unrest. The veterans who have completed their service are supposed to receive land grants and pensions, but these promises are often broken or delayed, creating a population of disgruntled ex-soldiers who can become a source of instability. The educational system that produces the literate elite of Roman society is limited to a small minority of the population, with most children receiving no formal schooling and learning only the basic skills necessary for their eventual occupations. The schools that do exist are private institutions that charge fees that are beyond the reach of ordinary families, and the curriculum that is taught emphasizes rhetoric and literature rather than practical skills or scientific knowledge. The teachers who work in these schools are often slaves or freedmen who have little social status despite their learning, and their students are primarily the sons of wealthy families who will eventually take their places in the governing class. Role of women in Roman society is severely constrained by legal and social restrictions that limit their participation in public life and their control over their own property and destinies. The marriages that are arranged for upper-class women are primarily political and economic, alliances that serve the interests of their families rather than their personal happiness or fulfillment. The women who work as traders, artisans, or in other occupations often face discrimination and exploitation that makes their lives even more difficult than those of their male counterparts. The priestesses who serve in certain religious cults enjoy somewhat greater freedom and respect, but they are still subject to the overall patriarchal structure of Roman society. The entertainment industry that flourishes in Rome is sustained by the suffering and exploitation of performers who have little choice in their participation and who face injury or death as routine occupational hazards. The gladiatorial schools that train fighters for the arena are brutal institutions where survival depends on skill, luck, and the willingness to kill fellow human beings for the amusement of spectators. The actors who perform in the theaters are often slaves or freedmen who must navigate the dangerous waters of political satire and social commentary, knowing that a poorly chosen joke or gesture can result in severe punishment. The healthcare system that exists in Rome is a haphazard collection of folk remedies, religious healing, and primitive medical practices that are as likely to harm as to help those who seek treatment. The physicians who practice in the city range from skilled professionals who have studied in Greece or Alexandria to complete charlatans who prey on the desperate and gullible. The hospitals that care for the sick and injured are primarily military institutions or charitable foundations that provide basic care to the poor, but they lack the resources and knowledge to deal effectively with serious illnesses or injuries. Your experience with Roman justice becomes more complex as you witness the execution of criminals in the arena, where condemned prisoners are forced to fight wild animals or each other in elaborate spectacles that combine entertainment with punishment. The crowds that attend these events cheer for blood and death with an enthusiasm that reveals the underlying brutality of Roman culture, despite its veneer of civilization and refinement. The victims who die in these spectacles are often guilty of minor crimes or political offenses that would be considered trivial in modern society, but that are treated as capital offenses in the harsh world of ancient Rome. The commercial life of the empire depends on a vast network of trade routes that connect the Mediterranean world with distant lands in Africa, Asia, and Northern Europe, bringing exotic goods and new ideas to the markets of Rome. The merchants who participate in this trade face enormous risks from pirates, bandits, storms, and political instability, but they also have the potential to earn enormous profits if their ventures succeed. The slaves who work in the warehouses and docks that handle this trade are essential to the functioning of the imperial economy, but they are also the most vulnerable members of society, subject to abuse and exploitation by their masters and overseers. The architectural wonders that define the visual landscape of Rome are built with the labor of countless workers who toil in dangerous conditions for minimal wages, using primitive tools and techniques that result in frequent accidents and injuries. The marble that adorns the greatest buildings is quarried by slaves who work in hellish conditions, while the skilled craftsmen who create the decorative elements are often foreigners who have been brought to Rome specifically for their talents. The engineers who design these structures are among the most respected members of Roman society, but they are also under enormous pressure to complete their projects on time and within budget, regardless of the human cost. The philosophical schools that attract intellectuals from throughout the empire offer different approaches to understanding the meaning of life and the nature of virtue, but they also reflect the political and social tensions of their time. The Stoics who preach acceptance of fate and duty to the state find favor with the authorities, while the Epicureans who advocate for pleasure and withdrawal from public life are viewed with suspicion. The cynics who criticize social conventions and material wealth are tolerated as harmless eccentrics, but they are also marginalized and excluded from positions of influence and power. The festivals and celebrations that mark the Roman calendar provide temporary relief from the hardships of daily life, but they also serve as mechanisms of social control that reinforce the existing power structure and provide outlets for popular discontent. The games and spectacles that accompany these festivals are funded by wealthy patrons who seek to gain political advantage through displays of generosity and public spirit. The religious ceremonies that are performed during these occasions are elaborate affairs that demonstrate the piety of the organizers, while also serving to unite the population in common rituals and beliefs. As you continue to navigate this ancient world, you begin to recognize the patterns of human behavior that transcend time and culture, seeing in the streets of Rome the same struggles for survival, dignity, and meaning that characterize human existence in every age. The love between family members, the loyalty between friends, and the hope for a better future that sustains people through the darkest times are universal experiences that connect you to these ancient people, despite the vast differences in your circumstances. However, you also recognize the profound ways in which modern civilization has transformed the human condition, creating possibilities for freedom, security, and self-determination that would have been unimaginable to the inhabitants of ancient Rome. The passage of months in ancient Rome reveals the cyclical nature of survival in this unforgiving world, where each season brings its own unique challenges, and where the margin between life and death remains razor-thin despite your growing familiarity with the harsh realities of daily existence. Your body has adapted to the physical demands of ancient life, developing the lean strength and endurance that comes from constant manual labor and minimal nutrition, while your mind has learned to navigate the complex social hierarchies and unspoken rules that govern every interaction in this rigidly stratified society. The innocence and naivety that once characterized your modern perspective have been replaced by a hard-won wisdom about the true nature of power, survival, and human nature that can only be gained through direct experience of life at its most brutal and uncompromising. The political landscape of Rome shifts constantly beneath your feet like quicksand. As emperors rise and fall through assassination, suicide, and military coup, creating an atmosphere of perpetual uncertainty where today's ally can become tomorrow's enemy, and where the wrong political affiliation can result in exile, imprisonment, or death. The senators who are supposed to represent the interests of the people are more concerned with their own survival and advancement, forming temporary alliances and betraying former friends as circumstances require. The bureaucrats who actually run the day-to-day operations of the empire are often corrupt and incompetent, more interested in enriching themselves than in serving the public good, creating a system where basic services are unreliable and where justice depends on your ability to pay bribes or call in favors. The technological limitations of ancient Rome become more apparent as you struggle with tasks that would be simple in the modern world, from preserving food without refrigeration to communicating with people in distant locations without telephone or internet. The tools that are available to ordinary people are crude and inefficient, requiring enormous amounts of time and physical effort to accomplish even basic tasks, while the more sophisticated equipment that does exist is expensive and difficult to maintain. The lack of standardized measurements and quality control means that products vary widely in their reliability and effectiveness, creating additional challenges for those who depend on them for their livelihood or survival. Your understanding of Roman medicine deepens as you witness the treatment of various ailments and injuries, observing how physicians attempt to heal patients, using methods that are based more on superstition and tradition than on scientific knowledge. The surgical procedures that are performed without anesthesia or proper sterilization are agonizing ordeals that many patients do not survive, while the medications that are prescribed often contain dangerous substances that can cause more harm than good. The concept of mental illness is poorly understood, with symptoms being attributed to demonic possession or divine punishment rather than to treatable medical conditions, leading to cruel and ineffective treatments that only add to the suffering of already vulnerable individuals. The agricultural system that feeds the empire is entirely dependent on favorable weather conditions and the availability of slave labor, creating a fragile foundation for the entire civilization that can be disrupted by drought, flood, or rebellion. The farmers who work the land are often tenant farmers who owe most of their crops to wealthy landowners, leaving them with barely enough to feed their own families and making them vulnerable to famine during poor harvest years. The transportation network that moves food from the countryside to the cities is slow and unreliable, with spoilage and theft reducing the amount of food that actually reaches the markets, where it is needed most. The construction industry that builds the monuments and infrastructure of Rome is a dangerous and exploitative business where workers face constant risks of injury or death from falling stones. collapsing scaffolding, and exposure to toxic materials. The architects and engineers who design these projects are skilled professionals who command respect and high wages, but the laborers who actually build them are often slaves or desperate, free men who work for minimal compensation under brutal conditions. The quality of construction varies widely depending on the resources available and the honesty of the contractors, with some buildings being masterpieces of engineering and others being death traps that collapse without warning. The legal profession in Rome is dominated by wealthy and well-connected individuals who use their knowledge of the law to advance their own interests and those of their clients, often at the expense of justice and fairness. The courts that are supposed to provide impartial judgment are frequently corrupted by bribery and political pressure, with verdicts that reflect the power and influence of the litigants rather than the merits of their cases. The punishments that are imposed for various crimes are often arbitrary and excessive, designed more to deter future wrongdoing than to provide proportional justice for the offense committed. The military forces that maintain order within the empire are a complex mix of professional soldiers, auxiliary troops, and urban militias that must be carefully balanced to prevent any single group from becoming too powerful. The legions that guard the frontiers are disciplined and effective fighting forces, but they are also expensive to maintain and potentially dangerous to the stability of the government if they become dissatisfied with their treatment. The veterans who have completed their service are supposed to receive land grants and pensions, but these promises are often broken or delayed, creating a population of disgruntled ex-soldiers who can become a source of political instability. The educational opportunities that are available to the general population are extremely limited, with most children receiving no formal schooling and learning only the basic skills necessary for their eventual occupations through apprenticeship or family training. The schools that do exist are private institutions that cater to the wealthy elite, offering instruction in rhetoric, literature, and philosophy that is designed to prepare students for careers in government or law. The teachers who work in these schools are often slaves or freedmen who have little social status despite their learning, and their students are primarily the sons of wealthy families who will eventually take their places in the governing class. The role of religion in Roman society is complex and multifaceted, with traditional Roman gods coexisting uneasily with exotic deities imported from conquered territories, and with the growing influence of mystery religions that promise salvation and eternal life to their followers. The imperial cult that deifies the emperor and his family requires public displays of loyalty that can feel hollow and meaningless to those who have witnessed the human frailties and moral failures of their supposedly divine rulers. The priests who serve these various religions often compete for influence and resources, creating a spiritual marketplace where salvation and divine favor are commodities that can be bought and sold. The entertainment industry that flourishes in Rome is built on the exploitation and suffering of performers who have little choice in their participation and who face injury or death as routine. Occupational hazards. The gladiatorial schools that train fighters for the arena are brutal institutions where survival depends on skill, luck, and the willingness to kill fellow human beings for the amusement of spectators. The actors who perform in the theaters are often slaves or freedmen who must navigate the dangerous waters of political satire and social commentary, knowing that a poorly chosen joke or gesture can result in severe punishment. The commercial networks that connect Rome to the far reaches of the empire are sustained by the labor of countless merchants, sailors, and caravan drivers who risk their lives to transport goods across dangerous seas and hostile territories. The profits that can be earned from successful trading ventures are enormous, but the risks are equally great, with pirates, bandits, storms, and political instability threatening to destroy entire fortunes in a matter of days. The slaves who work in the warehouses and docks that handle this trade are essential to the functioning of the imperial economy, but they are also the most vulnerable members of society, subject to abuse and exploitation by their masters and overseers. The urban planning that shapes the physical environment of Rome reflects the priorities and values of the ruling class, with magnificent public buildings and monuments occupying the most prominent locations, while the housing for ordinary citizens is cramped into overcrowded insulae that are prone to fire and collapse. The streets that connect these various districts are narrow and poorly maintained, creating traffic jams and sanitation problems that make daily life more difficult and dangerous. The public facilities that are provided for the general population, such as baths and latrines, are often inadequate and unsanitary, contributing to the spread of disease and the general degradation of urban life. The philosophical traditions that influence Roman thought and culture offer different approaches to understanding the meaning of life and the nature of virtue, but they also reflect the political and social tensions of their time. The Stoics, who preach acceptance of fate and duty to the state, find favor with the authorities, while the Epicureans, who advocate for pleasure and withdrawal from public life, are viewed with suspicion. The Cynics, who criticize social conventions and material wealth, are tolerated as harmless eccentrics, but they are also marginalized and excluded from positions of influence and power. The artistic achievements of Roman civilization are impressive in their scope and ambition, but they are also deeply influenced by the political needs of the ruling class, who use art and architecture to promote their version of Roman values and to demonstrate their power and wealth. The sculptors who create the statues that adorn public spaces are skilled craftsmen who command respect and high wages, but they are also constrained by the expectations and demands of their wealthy patrons. The painters who decorate the walls of private homes and public buildings must balance their artistic vision with the practical requirements of pleasing their clients and avoiding political controversy. The scientific knowledge that exists in Rome is limited by the lack of systematic research methods and the dominance of philosophical speculation over empirical observation. The physicians who practice medicine base their treatments on theories about the balance of bodily humors, rather than on careful study of anatomy and physiology, while the engineers who design buildings and infrastructure rely more on trial and error than on mathematical calculation. The natural philosophers who study the physical world are more interested in abstract questions about the nature of reality than in practical applications of their knowledge. The family structures that form the basic units of Roman society are hierarchical and patriarchal, with the male head of household exercising absolute authority over his wife, children, and slaves. The marriages that are arranged for upper-class families are primarily political and economic alliances that serve the interests of the participants rather than their personal happiness or fulfillment. The children who are born into these families are valued primarily for their ability to continue the family line and advance its interests, with little consideration given to their individual talents or desires. The death rituals that mark the end of life in Roman society reflect the complex beliefs about the afterlife that coexist within the empire, with traditional Roman practices being modified by influences from Greece, Egypt, and other conquered territories. The funerals that are held for wealthy citizens are elaborate affairs that demonstrate the status and wealth of the deceased, while the poor are often buried in mass graves or cremated without ceremony. The tombs that line the roads leading out of the city are monuments to the vanity and insecurity of the living as much as they are memorials to the dead. As you continue to exist in this ancient world, you begin to appreciate the profound ways in which modern civilization has transformed the human condition, creating possibilities for freedom, security, and self-determination that would have been unimaginable to the inhabitants of ancient Rome. The democratic institutions that protect individual rights, the scientific methods that have unlocked the secrets of nature, and the technological innovations that have made life easier and more comfortable, all represent centuries of human progress and development. However, you also recognize the universal human experiences that connect you to these ancient people, despite the vast differences in your circumstances, seeing in their struggles for survival, dignity, and meaning the same fundamental challenges that face every generation. The deepening shadows of your extended stay in ancient Rome reveal the profound psychological toll that constant survival takes on the human spirit, as you find yourself changing in ways that would have been unimaginable when you first arrived in this harsh and unforgiving world. Your modern sensibilities about human dignity, individual rights, and social justice have been gradually eroded by the daily necessity of adapting to a society where might makes right and where compassion is often viewed as weakness rather than virtue. The laughter that once came easily to your lips has been replaced by a guarded wariness, and the trust that you once placed in the basic goodness of humanity has been shattered by repeated encounters with cruelty, exploitation, and indifference to suffering. The seasonal cycles that govern life in Rome bring their own rhythms of hardship and brief respite, as the scorching summers create conditions that are ideal for the spread of plague and pestilence, while the bitter winters expose the inadequacies of ancient heating systems and the vulnerability of the poor to cold and hunger. The spring floods that regularly inundate the lower-lying areas of the city wash away homes and businesses with devastating regularity, while the autumn harvest determine whether the coming year will bring abundance or famine to the millions who depend on the agricultural output of the empire. Your body has learned to read these natural signs with the instinctive wisdom of a survivor, conserving energy during the lean months and taking advantage of every opportunity during the times of plenty. The interpersonal relationships that you form in this ancient world are necessarily different from those that would develop in modern society, shaped by the constant awareness that today's friend might become tomorrow's betrayer if circumstances change or if political winds shift in unexpected directions. The bonds of loyalty and affection that do form are therefore deeper and more precious, tested by adversity and strengthened by shared suffering in ways that create connections that transcend the normal boundaries of class, ethnicity, and social status. The elderly slave who teaches you the secrets of survival in the urban jungle, the young prostitute who shares her meager earnings when you are hungry, and the grizzled veteran who protects you from street thugs all become part of an unlikely family bound together by mutual dependence and hard-won respect. The economic realities of ancient Rome create a world where financial security is always temporary, and where even the wealthy live in constant fear of losing their fortunes to political upheaval, natural disaster, or simply the whims of those who hold power over them. The merchants who accumulate great wealth through successful trading ventures can lose everything in a single storm or pirate attack, while the senators who control vast estates can find themselves stripped of their property and exiled from the city if they fall from imperial favor. The skilled craftsmen who earn good wages for their specialized knowledge must constantly worry about competition from cheaper slave labor or changes in fashion that could make their skills obsolete overnight. The technological innovation that does occur in Roman society is often driven by military necessity rather than by a desire to improve the lives of ordinary citizens, with advances in engineering and construction being primarily focused on building better fortifications, more efficient siege weapons, and more impressive monuments to imperial power. The water mills that grind grain and the mechanical devices that lift heavy stones are marvels of ancient engineering, but they are also expensive to build and maintain, limiting their availability to wealthy individuals and government projects. The scientific knowledge that exists is fragmented and often inaccurate, based more on philosophical speculation than on systematic observation and experimentation, creating a world where superstition and fact are often indistinguishable. The healthcare system that serves the Roman population is a patchwork of folk remedies, religious healing, and primitive medical practices that are as likely to harm as to help those who seek treatment. The physicians who practice in the city range from skilled professionals who have studied in the medical schools of Greece and Alexandria to complete charlatans who prey on the desperate and gullible with false promises of miraculous cures. The hospitals that exist are primarily military institutions or charitable foundations that provide basic care to the poor, but they lack the resources and knowledge to deal effectively with serious illnesses or injuries, making death from treatable conditions a common occurrence. The legal system that governs Roman society is complex and often contradictory, with laws that vary depending on your social status, citizenship, and the particular jurisdiction in which you find yourself. The courts that are supposed to provide justice are frequently corrupted by bribery and political pressure, with verdicts that reflect the wealth and connections of the litigants rather than the merits of their cases. The lawyers who practice in these courts are skilled in rhetoric and legal technicalities, but they are also adept at bribery and intimidation, using whatever means necessary to achieve their clients' objectives, regardless of the impact on truth or justice. The military forces that maintain Roman dominance over the known world are organized into a complex hierarchy that reflects the social stratification of the empire itself, with citizen soldiers receiving better pay and treatment than auxiliary troops recruited from conquered territories. The discipline that is maintained within the legions is harsh and unforgiving, with severe punishments for disobedience or cowardice that can include decimation, where every 10th man in a unit is executed as an example to the others. The veterans who survive their terms of service often struggle to readjust to civilian life, their experiences in combat having left them with physical and psychological scars that make it difficult to find their place in peaceful society. The educational opportunities that are available to the general population are extremely limited, with literacy being restricted to a small minority of the population, and with most knowledge being transmitted through oral tradition rather than written texts. The schools that do exist are private institutions that charge fees beyond the reach of ordinary families, and the curriculum that is taught emphasizes rhetoric and literature rather than practical skills or scientific knowledge. The libraries that contain the accumulated wisdom of the ancient world are accessible only to scholars and wealthy patrons, while the vast majority of the population remains ignorant of the great philosophical and scientific achievements of their time. The religious landscape of Rome is a complex mixture of traditional Roman beliefs, imported deities from conquered territories, and emerging mystery religions that promise salvation and eternal life to their followers. The imperial cult that deifies the emperor and his family requires public displays of loyalty that can feel hollow and meaningless to those who have witnessed the human frailties and moral failures of their supposedly divine rulers. The festivals and ceremonies that mark the religious calendar provide temporary relief from the hardships of daily life, but they also serve as mechanisms of social control that reinforce the existing power structure and provide outlets for popular discontent. The entertainment industry that flourishes in Rome is built on the exploitation and suffering of performers who have little choice in their participation and who face injury or death as routine occupational hazards. The gladiatorial games that pack the Colosseum are brutal spectacles where enslaved fighters are forced to kill each other for the amusement of spectators, who cheer loudest when blood is spilled, while the chariot races that draw enormous crowds to the Circus Maximus are equally violent affairs where drivers regularly die in spectacular crashes that are considered part of the entertainment value. The theaters that present comedies and tragedies are somewhat more civilized, but they are also venues for political propaganda and social commentary that can be dangerous too. Performers who cross the wrong people, the commercial networks that connect Rome to the far reaches of the empire, are sustained by the labor of countless merchants, sailors, and caravan drivers who risk their lives to transport goods across dangerous seas and hostile territories. The profits that can be earned from successful trading ventures are enormous, but the risks are equally great, with pirates, bandits, storms, and political instability threatening to destroy entire fortunes in a matter of days. The exotic goods that flow into the markets of Rome from distant lands create a cosmopolitan atmosphere that masks the brutal realities of the conquest and exploitation that make this trade possible. The urban environment of Rome itself is a study in contrasts, where magnificent public buildings and monuments stand alongside overcrowded slums and dangerous neighborhoods, where violence and crime are everyday occurrences. The infrastructure that supports the daily life of the city is impressive in its scope and ambition, but it is also fragile and prone to failure in ways that can have devastating consequences for those who depend on it. The aqueducts that bring fresh water to the city are marvels of engineering, but they are also vulnerable to earthquake damage, enemy sabotage, and the simple wear and tear of time and weather. The cultural achievements of Roman civilization are impressive in their scope and influence, but they are also deeply shaped by the political needs of the ruling class, who use art, literature, and architecture to promote their version of Roman values and to demonstrate their power and wealth. The poets who celebrate the glories of empire often do so while carefully avoiding any criticism of current policies or leaders, knowing that a single misplaced word can result in exile or worse. The historians who record the deeds of emperors and generals must balance their desire for accuracy with their need to survive in a world where truth-telling can be a dangerous profession. The family structures that form the basic units of Roman society are hierarchical and patriarchal, with the male head of household exercising absolute authority over his wife, children, and slaves. The marriages that are arranged for upper-class families are primarily political and economic, alliances that serve the interests of the participants rather than their personal happiness or fulfillment, while the children who are born into these families are valued primarily for their ability to continue the family line and advance its interests. The women who live in this society face severe restrictions on their freedom and autonomy, with their legal status being little better than that of property in many cases. The death that stalks the streets of Rome is a constant presence that shapes every aspect of daily life, from the high infant mortality rates that prevent parents from becoming too attached to their children to the epidemic diseases that can wipe out entire neighborhoods in a matter of weeks. The funeral practices that mark the end of life reflect the complex beliefs about the afterlife that coexist within the empire, with elaborate ceremonies for the wealthy, contrasting sharply with the mass graves and unmarked cremations that await the poor. The tombs that line the roads leading out of the city serve as reminders of the mortality that awaits all who live in this ancient world, regardless of their status or achievements. The psychological adaptation that allows you to survive in this harsh environment comes at a cost that you are only beginning to understand, as you find yourself becoming harder and more cynical with each passing day. The empathy that once came naturally to you has been replaced by a calculating self-interest that prioritizes your own survival above all other considerations, while the idealism that once motivated your actions has been ground down by the daily reality of living in a world where noble intentions are often punished and where pragmatic ruthlessness is rewarded. The person that you are becoming is better suited to survive in ancient Rome, but it is also a person that your former self might not recognize or approve of. As you continue to navigate this ancient world, you begin to understand that the true tragedy of life in Rome is not just the physical hardships and dangers that threaten daily survival, but the way that these conditions corrupt and degrade the human spirit, forcing people to choose between their moral principles and their basic survival needs. The compromises that you make in order to continue existing in this harsh environment accumulate over time, creating a burden of guilt and self-doubt that weighs heavily on your conscience. The hope that once sustained you through the darkest moments gradually fades as you realize that there is no escape from this world and no Return to the comfortable certainties of modern life, the final understanding that comes to you after enduring the countless hardships of ancient Rome is perhaps the most profound realization of all. That survival in this world is not merely about overcoming physical challenges or navigating social hierarchies, but about maintaining some essential part of your humanity in the face of circumstances that seem designed to strip away everything that makes life meaningful and dignified. The months that you have spent in this harsh environment have taught you that the human spirit is both more resilient and more fragile than you ever imagined, capable of adapting to almost any condition while also being vulnerable to corruption and degradation that can transform a person into something they no longer recognize. The wisdom that you have gained through your struggles in ancient Rome extends far beyond the practical knowledge of how to survive in a dangerous and unforgiving world, encompassing a deeper understanding of the forces that shape human civilization and the delicate balance between order and chaos that determines whether a society thrives or collapses. You have witnessed firsthand how the concentration of power in the hands of a few individuals can create systems of oppression and exploitation that persist for generations, while also seeing how the basic human needs for food, shelter, and security can drive people to acts of both great kindness and terrible cruelty, depending on the circumstances they face. The relationships that you have formed with the people of ancient Rome have revealed the universal nature of human emotions and desires, showing you that love, fear, hope, and despair are constants that transcend time and culture, even when they are expressed in ways that are shaped by the specific conditions of a particular era. The friendship that you have shared with fellow survivors, the respect that you have earned from those who have witnessed your struggles, and the compassion that you have shown to those who are even less fortunate than yourself, all serve as evidence that the fundamental values that make us human can persist even in the most challenging circumstances. The technological marvels that surround you in ancient Rome, from the massive aqueducts that bring water to the city, to the sophisticated engineering that supports the great amphitheaters and temples, represent the pinnacle of human achievement in their time. Yet they also highlight the vast distance that separates this ancient world from the modern era in which you truly belong. The roads that connect the far reaches of the empire are impressive feats of construction that will endure for centuries, but they are built with the blood and sweat of countless workers who will never receive recognition for their contributions to this lasting monument to Roman ambition and organization. The political systems that govern the empire reveal both the potential and the limitations of human attempts to create order and justice in a complex society, showing how noble ideals can be corrupted by the realities of power and how the best intentions can lead to unintended consequences that cause suffering for those who are least able to protect themselves. The senators who debate policy in the grand halls of government are often more concerned with their own advancement than with the welfare of the people they are supposed to serve, while the emperors who wield ultimate authority are isolated from the daily realities of life for ordinary citizens by layers of bureaucracy. Protocol. The cultural achievements of Roman civilization, from the poetry of Virgil and Ovid to the historical works of Tacitus and Livy, represent humanity's ongoing effort to understand and give meaning to the human experience, creating works of art and literature that will continue to inspire and educate people for thousands of years to come. The philosophers who gather in the schools and academies of the city wrestle with the same fundamental questions about the nature of existence, morality, and the good life that they continue to challenge thinkers in every age, their insights remaining relevant even as the specific circumstances of their time fade into history. The economic systems that drive the prosperity of Rome are built on foundations that would be considered morally unacceptable in the modern world, with slavery providing the labor that supports the comfortable lifestyles of the wealthy elite, and with the exploitation of conquered territories providing the resources that fuel the growth of the empire. The merchants who accumulate vast fortunes through their trading enterprises are participants in a global economy that connects distant lands and cultures, but they are also complicit in systems of oppression that cause immense suffering for those who are forced to provide the goods and services that generate these profits. The military forces that maintain Roman dominance over the known world are composed of individuals who are both perpetrators and victims of violence, soldiers who must kill in order to survive while also facing the constant threat of death or injury, and service to an empire that may or may not reward their sacrifices. The veterans who return from campaigns on distant frontiers often struggle to readjust to civilian life, their experiences having left them with physical and psychological wounds that never fully heal, while the families they leave behind must cope with the uncertainty and fear that comes with having loved ones in constant danger. The religious beliefs that provide comfort and meaning to the people of ancient Rome reflect humanity's eternal search for transcendence and purpose, offering hope for life after death and divine justice that will ultimately right the wrongs of this world. The festivals and ceremonies that mark the religious calendar create moments of joy and celebration that provide temporary respite from the hardships of daily life, while the mystery religions that promise salvation and eternal life offer more profound spiritual transformation for those who are willing to undergo the required initiations and commitments. The educational opportunities that are available to a privileged few in Roman society represent humanity's ongoing effort to preserve and transmit knowledge from one generation to the next, creating a legacy of learning that will survive the eventual collapse of the empire itself. The schools and libraries that serve as centers of intellectual activity are precious resources that must be protected and nurtured, while the teachers and scholars who dedicate their lives to learning and instruction are the unsung heroes who ensure that human knowledge and wisdom continue to grow and develop over time. The healthcare practices that attempt to heal the sick and injured in ancient Rome, while primitive by modern standards, represent humanity's compassionate response to suffering and its determination to fight against disease and death, even when the odds of success are slim. The physicians who risk their own health to care for plague victims and the healers who use whatever knowledge and resources are available to ease pain and promote recovery are examples of the medical profession's eternal commitment to serving those who are most vulnerable and in need. The artistic achievements that beautify the public spaces of Rome and provide entertainment for its citizens represent humanity's irrepressible desire to create beauty and meaning even in the midst of hardship and struggle. The sculptors who carve magnificent statues from blocks of marble and the painters who cover walls with scenes of myth and history are preserving moments of human experience that will continue to move and inspire people long after the specific Circumstances that created them have been forgotten. The architectural wonders that define the physical landscape of Rome, from the soaring dome of the Pantheon to the massive arches of the Colosseum, represent humanity's ambition to create structures that will endure for millennia, serving as monuments to the ingenuity and determination of their builders. The engineers who design these structures and the workers who construct them are participating in projects that transcend their individual lifespans, contributing to a legacy that will outlive them and continue to inspire awe and admiration in future generations. The family bonds that provide stability and support in the harsh world of ancient Rome demonstrate the fundamental importance of human connection and the ways in which love and loyalty can survive even in the most challenging circumstances. The parents who sacrifice their own comfort to ensure that their children have food and shelter, the siblings who support each other through times of crisis, and the friends who remain faithful despite the pressures that might drive them apart. All serve as examples of the relationships that give life meaning and purpose, the legal systems that attempt to create justice and maintain order in Roman society, while often flawed and corrupted by the realities of power and wealth, represent humanity's ongoing effort to create fair and equitable ways of resolving conflicts and protecting the rights of individuals. The judges who strive to render impartial verdicts and the lawyers who advocate for their clients are participating in a process that, despite its imperfections, represents progress toward a more just and civilized society. The death that comes to all who live in ancient Rome, whether from disease, violence, or simply the passage of time, serves as a reminder of the precious nature of life and the importance of making the most of whatever time we are given. The funeral rites that honor the deceased and the monuments that preserve their memory are expressions of humanity's refusal to accept that death is the final word, reflecting our belief that something of value persists beyond the end of physical existence. As you feel yourself beginning to drift away from this ancient world, carried along by the gentle current of time that flows like a peaceful river through the centuries, you experience a profound sense of gratitude for the opportunity to witness the struggles and triumphs of these remarkable people who lived so long ago. The lessons that you have learned about courage, resilience, and the fundamental nature of the human experience will remain with you always, serving as a source of strength and wisdom that will enrich your understanding of your own life and times. Feel yourself floating gently upward, away from the stone streets and crowded insulae of ancient Rome, rising above the 7 hills as they fade into the mist of history and memory. The sounds of the ancient city grow fainter and fainter, replaced by the gentle whisper of wind through leaves and the soft murmur of distant water flowing over smooth stones. You are leaving behind a world of hardship and struggle, but you are also carrying with you the precious knowledge of what it means to be truly human in the face of overwhelming challenges and impossible odds. As you continue to rise through the layers of time, you begin to see the long arc of human progress that connects the ancient world to the modern era, witnessing the gradual development of technologies, institutions, and ideas that have transformed the human condition over the course of millennia. The suffering that you witnessed in ancient Rome has not been in vain, but has contributed to the accumulated wisdom and compassion that have made possible the more comfortable and secure world in which you truly belong. Feel yourself settling gently back into the soft sanctuary of your own bed, in your own time, where clean water flows at the touch of a button, where food is abundant and safe, where medical care can heal injuries and diseases that would have been fatal in ancient Rome, and where the rule of law protects you from the violence and chaos that once ruled the ancient world. Feel gratitude flowing through your body like warm honey, appreciation for the countless generations who struggled and sacrificed to build the civilization that you now inhabit, and recognition of the precious gift that is your modern life with all its conveniences and opportunities. Let your breathing slow and deepen as you feel the warmth and comfort of your familiar surroundings, the soft pillow beneath your head, the gentle weight of blankets that keep you warm and secure. The harsh realities of ancient Rome fade into the realm of dreams and memory, replaced by the peaceful certainty that you are exactly where you belong, in this moment and this place, surrounded by the fruits of centuries of human progress, and protected by the institutions and technologies that make modern life possible. Close your eyes and let sleep carry you away to peaceful dreams, knowing that you have gained a deeper appreciation for the extraordinary nature of ordinary life in the modern world, and that you will wake tomorrow with a renewed sense of wonder at the simple miracles that surround you every day. The story of ancient Rome continues to unfold in your dreams, but now it is a story of hope and progress, of humanity's long journey from darkness into light, from suffering into comfort, from fear into security, and peace. Rest now, and let the gentle rhythms of your breathing carry you into the deep and restorative sleep that will prepare you for another day in your own miraculous time, where the struggles of the past have been transformed into the blessings of the present, and where the future holds endless possibilities for continued growth, discovery, and joy. Sleep well and dream of the long river of time that connects all human experience, flowing peacefully through the night toward a dawn that promises new wonders and new reasons to be grateful for the gift of life itself.